The dirt road ended where the forest got thicker. I lifted my backpack, grabbed my supply crate, and started the last hike toward Arbor Tower. Each step took me farther from civilization and felt like leaving my old life behind. The endless code reviews, the fluorescent lights, the "we need to talk" text from Sarah. I'd traded a fancy office view of Chicago for a lookout post in the middle of nowhere. I was ready to disappear. "Miller?" A rough voice startled me. A leathery man in a Forest Service uniform stepped from the trees. "Dave Peters, been waiting for you. Almost thought you wouldn't make it before dark." He led me up a winding trail, chatting over his shoulder about weather and radio rules. When we reached the top of the ridge, I stopped cold. The maps hadn't prepared me. Arbor Tower wasn't the steel lookout I expected. Instead, a wooden building clung to the immense trunk of what looked like a petrified redwood, a tree impossibly huge for this forest. The cabin sat 80 feet up, pierced straight through its center by the ancient trunk like a spike. "Quite the sight, eh?" Dave said, mistaking my unease for awe. "Built back in '39. Nobody knows how a redwood grew this far north. Instead of chopping it down, they built around it. Said it was already perfectly placed." Inside, a spiral stairway coiled around the massive trunk, flowing from a stone basement below up through the ceiling. The space was simple but had everything: small kitchen, work desk, narrow bed, and windows showing miles of wild forest. As sunset neared, Dave finished his instructions. At the door, he paused. "One last thing," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "Old ranger habit. If you're ever in real trouble, no radio, no help coming, you go to the basement. See the huge taproot where the tree meets the dirt? Knock on it. 3 fast taps, pause, then 2 more. He tapped the rhythm in the air. The old guys called it knocking on the landlord's door. His laugh didn't reach his eyes. I nodded politely, already marking it as bumpkin superstition, exactly the illogical nonsense I'd come here to avoid. "Just Forest Service stories," Dave added, sensing my doubt. "Anyway, you're set. Nearest ranger station is 22 miles southwest. See you in 3 months, city boy." After he left, silence fell like a heavy blanket. I unpacked carefully, lining up books and my laptop. As night arrived, I sat at the window, watching the forest vanish into black, the deep quiet I'd wanted wrapped around me like a shield. But as the hours crawled by, I became too aware of that ancient trunk right in the room's center. In the lamplight, the bark seemed to ripple like frozen muscle. When I touched it, the wood felt unnaturally cold. For a second, I could have sworn I felt something moving just below the surface. I snatched my hand back, annoyed at my own imagination. This quiet, this solitude, it was exactly what I needed. Yet as I got ready for bed on my first night in Arbor Tower, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't just empty, it was listening. The next morning, I woke up feeling ridiculous about last night's jitters. That tree trunk was exactly what it looked like, a massive petrified redwood held up by whatever engineering magic kept this tower standing. Sunlight poured through the windows, showing nothing scary, just dust floating in the air. The first week was peaceful. I settled into a routine: coffee at dawn, scanning the woods with binoculars, radio check-ins, maintenance work, and lots of reading. The quiet I'd wanted wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I even got used to the tree, sometimes resting my hand on its ancient bark while cooking dinner, like we were roommates getting to know each other. On the 8th day, the air changed. The morning sky had a weird greenish tint near the horizon. By noon, clouds boiled up behind the western ridge faster than seemed natural. They weren't normal storm clouds. They were a sick, bruised color that made my skin prickle. "Storm front moving in," I reported during my afternoon radio check. "Looks nasty," the ranger's voice crackled back. "Nothing serious on radar, Miller. Just light rain expected, clearing by tomorrow." I frowned at the approaching clouds. Better double-check that forecast. The first gust hit as I was securing outdoor gear. It nearly knocked me over, forcing me to crawl back to the door on hands and knees. The wind didn't blow. It shrieked, a high wail finding every crack in the tower. By nightfall, the storm swallowed Arbor Tower whole. Rain hammered the windows so hard I thought they'd break. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, lighting up a world tilted sideways by the gale. During one close strike, the radio blasted static before going dead. "Base, this is Arbor Tower. Do you copy?" Only silence. "Base, Miller at Arbor Tower. Radio check." Equipment lights glowed, but nobody answered. Another flash and simultaneous thunderclap shook the whole structure. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. My solar array was fried. The backup generator should have kicked in, but it didn't. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam pitifully small against the total darkness. That first night I told myself it was just a storm. Power would come back, comms would restore, and I'd laugh about this with Dave later. But the storm didn't stop. 3 days later, it still raged full force. My flashlight batteries died, forcing me to use emergency candles. The radio stayed silent, my cell phone useless without signal or power. The tower groaned and swayed in ways that shouldn't be possible, like the whole forest was trying to shake me loose. On the 5th day, an eerie quiet fell. Rain still fell, but the wind dropped to a whisper. I stepped onto the observation deck, hoping to see damage or a break in the clouds. What I saw froze my blood. The lush green forest had become a gray, waterlogged prison stretching to every horizon. Fog slithered between trees like something alive, hiding any path to safety. Mudslides on distant slopes confirmed what I already knew. Hiking out was suicide. Standing there, watching water drip from the roof, I realized something had shifted. The beautiful view that once meant freedom now screamed how utterly alone I was. The silence that felt peaceful before now pressed on my ears like physical weight, and underneath it all, so faint I might have imagined, I felt a faint vibration through the tower floor, not random shaking from wind, something rhythmic, patient, like the storm was just the start of something worse. I pressed my palm against the tree trunk, needing solid comfort. The wood felt colder than ever, despite the damp air. And this time, no mistake. Something moved beneath the surface. A slow pulse, like a heartbeat waking after centuries of sleep. I jerked my hand away from the trunk, heart pounding like a drum. That wasn't possible. The tree was petrified, dead wood, solid through. I pressed my palm against it again, holding my breath. Nothing. Silence. Just the building settling, I muttered. My voice sounded strange and hollow. Or maybe my own pulse in my ears. But deep down, I knew better. Days blurred together after the worst of the storm passed. The rain kept falling. Not the fury of before, just a steady, patient downpour, like it was mocking me. Each drop felt like another second of my life ticking away. By my count, it had been nearly 3 weeks since my last radio call. 3 weeks watching my supplies vanish. 3 weeks staring into the foggy forest, praying for some sign of rescue. No one was coming. The cold truth settled in my gut like a stone, heavy and final. I rationed what little food I had left, half a protein bar for breakfast, a few spoonfuls of cold beans at night. My belt needed 2 new holes punched through with my pocket knife. My hands shook all the time now, from hunger, from cold, from crawling fear, maybe all 3. Every day I'd crunch the numbers on my maps. How far to a ranger station, a fire road, anything? Every time I added it up, the answer came back the same. Trying to hike out, weak and hungry, through that flooded, dangerous mess, that was suicide. On what I figured must be the 23rd day, I woke up to the gurgling growl of my own stomach. The hunger pain had turned into a dull, constant ache. I sat on my cot's edge, head in my hands. Dave's words drifted back, clear as day. If you're ever in a real bind out here, no radio, no hope. A dry, cracked laugh escaped me. Had I actually come to this? Knocking on a tree? Was this what desperate men did before the end? Chased fairy tales? It seemed like it was. The old stairs groaned under my feet as I went down into the basement. Each step dragged me further from the gray light into shadows. My flashlight beam jumped around in my trembling hand, making the walls dance with ghostly shapes. The air down there hung thick, smelling of damp earth mixed with something older, like mud stirred up from the bottom of a deep, ancient lake. The light found that massive taproot, black and slick with sweat. It stabbed straight down into the stone floor, like a giant spear thrust upward from below. I faced it, feeling ridiculous and scared half to death in equal measure. 3 sharp taps, I whispered to the darkness. Then 2 more. My knuckles hovered over the cold, wet wood. Part of my mind, the old me, the logical city guy, screamed this was pure madness. But that voice grew weaker every day, starved right along with my body. Tap, tap, tap. My knuckles cracked sharply against the dense wood. The sound vanished, swallowed whole by the basement's thick silence. Just like Dave said, I paused, my own breathing loud in my ears. Then, tap, tap. I waited, not breathing. For what? The rumble of a truck? A magic door in the root? How incredibly stupid I'd been. The sheer stupidity crashed down on me like a wave. Nothing happened, only silence. Self-loathing hit me hard, knocking on trees like a scared kid. This is how far I'd fallen. This was how I was going to die. My last act, tapping on dead wood. I dragged myself back up the winding stairs, each step heavier than the last. Back in the main room, I collapsed onto my cot, staring up at the beams overhead. The hunger pain had faded to a strange, floating nothingness. If help didn't come soon, I'd have to try that hike. Better to die moving than wasting away here, talking to trees. My eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion pulling me under. The last thing I saw was that massive trunk rising through the floor, vanishing into the ceiling like some dark pillar holding up the sky, or maybe holding down the earth below. I fell into an uneasy sleep, too worn out to notice the change deep below. The constant whisper of wind through the old floorboards. It had stopped. For the first time since I'd arrived, the tower was utterly silent, perfectly still. It was listening. I stumbled back to my living quarters in a daze. The basement's thick silence clung to me like the smell of soil and old wood. Something had fundamentally changed in the tower, in the very air. Knocking on that root had altered things, like yanking a loose thread on a sweater. I'd pulled, and now something was unraveling. That night, I fell into a restless sleep, my body giving in to exhaustion while my mind raced. Hunger gnawed at my stomach. I'd eaten my last beans hours earlier. Only 3 stale crackers and half a chocolate bar remained. Something jolted me awake in the dark. Not a noise exactly, a feeling. A faint vibration so subtle it could have been my own pulse echoing through the floorboards. I froze, straining to separate it from my hammering heart. There, a rhythm, slow, purposeful, rising through the wood, rising. Then I heard it, the sound I had been waiting for since my foolish ritual. Tap, 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 tap. Not my pattern. An answer. It seemed impossibly far away, like it came from deep under the basement. I shot upright, breath trapped in my throat, listening until my ears hurt. It didn't come again. Only those 4 deliberate taps, then silence. Morning brought merciful normality. Sunlight glowed through the windows. I told myself I'd dreamed it all, a hallucination from hunger and loneliness. I spent the day counting supplies, planning escape routes through flooded woods, anything to ignore those nighttime sounds. Logic took over. Buildings settle. Wood shifts with temperature. That dead tree at the tower's core was just adjusting after the storm. There had to be a scientific explanation. But when darkness fell, I sat stiffly in my chair, waiting, listening. It started just after midnight. The same rhythm, but changed, clearer, closer. No longer a distant echo from deep underground, but sharp and deliberate, somewhere right below the basement floor. Tap, 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 tap. The tremors in the structure felt stronger now. I sensed them through the chair and floorboards beneath my feet. This wasn't random settling. It was measured, intentional. Then it stopped, leaving only my pounding heartbeat. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Dave's words echoed in my head, his nervous laugh. That odd phrase he'd used, knocking on the landlord's door. Suddenly, with icy clarity, I understood. This tower wasn't built to spot fires. The tree wasn't kept as some relic. The whole structure, this complex, isolated outpost, existed for one purpose. It wasn't designed to keep the weather out. It was built to keep something in. The ancient tree wasn't dead. It was dormant, a passageway, a locked gate, and I'd knocked on its door. Generations of fire watchers hadn't just guarded the forest. They'd kept watch over something imprisoned below us. That ritual wasn't a call for help. It was a disguised warning passed through folklore. Dangerous knowledge hidden in plain sight. And I, in my desperate arrogance, had done it anyway. I pressed my ear to the creaking floor, the vibrations sharp against my skin. Whatever was coming didn't hurry. It moved with patience. It had waited forever. Now it was rising. Tap, 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 tap. It'd be closer every night. I was certain. It climbed toward me, answering my summons. Trapped, I had only one path left, upward, into the tower that had become my cage. The landlord was coming to collect. I spent the night huddled in the tower's highest corner, pressed against the freezing glass. Sleep never came. Every groan of the wooden structure sent electric jolts of terror through me. Morning offered no comfort. The fog had grown thicker, swallowing even the nearest trees. I floated in a gray sea, the ancient tree trunk beside me my only anchor to reality. My own body felt foreign. 4 days without real food had carved me hollow. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. thoughts shattered and reformed like broken glass. Only 2 stale crackers remained, tucked in my pocket. A last meal for a dead man walking. When darkness returned, I knew in my bones tonight changed everything. The tapping wouldn't stay distant anymore. It was here, below me, waiting. My eyes locked on the fire axe. What could it do against something as old as the earth? Yet some animal part of me refused to die without a fight. I wrenched it from the wall, feeling its weight. The handle felt smooth from years of sweaty palms. Had others stood here like this? Heard what I heard? The first vibration hit earlier than before, just as twilight died into full night. Not like the faint tremors of past nights. This was a deliberate thump that shook dust from the ceiling. I felt it through my boots. One strike, then a pause that stretched forever. 2 quick strikes, a shorter pause, a final strike. The rhythm mirrored my own desperate knocking days earlier. My knuckles turned white around the axe handle. Another impact, stronger this time. The whole tower swayed. Whatever lived below had reached the basement. My feet moved without command, carrying me down the spiral stairs. Logic screamed to climb higher, but some deep pull drew me downward. If death came, I'd meet it eyes open. Pitch blackness swallowed the basement. My flashlight beam cut through, revealing the massive taproot. It looked bigger now, its surface slick with something thick and oily that threw back rainbow shimmers. A violent crash shook the foundations. The floor buckled under my boots. Hairline cracks spider-webbed out from the root's base. Another impact, and wood splintered upward, followed by puffs of dark soil. Clarity washed over me. Dave's words echoed in my mind, and I finally understood the nervous laugh that came with them. Not advice, a warning passed down through generations of watchmen, disguised as campfire tales. This tower wasn't a lookout. It was a cork in a bottle, and I just invited whatever was inside out. The next impact changed everything. No solid thud now, a wet, tearing sound that turned my guts to water. The root itself began splitting from within. Dark cracks raced up its surface, widening with every second. Something lived inside that root. Something that had always been there, waiting. The splitting grew louder as thick, dark ooze seemed from the cracks. The smell hit me, the ancient stench of things never touched by light, decay older than death itself. The axe trembled in my hands as the root's center bulged outward. A wet, sliding noise came from within the wood. The largest crack widened enough to see into the hollow core, into a darkness so complete it swallowed my flashlight beam. Something moved in that blackness, something that had waited for a fool to knock. The landlord wasn't coming to collect. It was coming home.